So I've been getting a lot of questions on the channel about flash and off-camera flash and how and when to use it. So I thought that it would be a good idea to do a very beginner introduction to how to use specifically off-camera flash with your camera. And we're kind of doing this as an added bonus on YouTube hard mode. I've come on a Saturday afternoon to one of the busiest beaches in Southern California. So let's jump in. All right, so first things first, let's talk about our kit for today's video. It's always a windy day. It's never not a windy day, huh? I wanted to go as entry level as I could with one exception, and I'll explain that when we get to it. First of all, I've got a basic tripod style light stand. I got this light stand secondhand. This was less than 50 bucks. But it gets pretty tall, it's relatively secure, and on the bottom you can place weights. And that is one thing that I would always recommend whenever using any sort of stand or lights, especially in an environment like this where you might be in the wind. You want to bring a little bit of weight with you if you can, unless you know that there's going to be rocks everywhere. Now there are a lot of different light stands that you can get out there. Some are very, very cheap, very bad, honestly, so I wouldn't get those. This one is pretty decent, like I said, less than 50 bucks. I got it secondhand. All right, so next, and you might be saying, what the heck is that? This is our diffusion. This is what we're gonna use for our diffuser for our shots. This is a shoot-through umbrella. These are very inexpensive. I got this one new for $14 at a local camera shop. Sometimes you don't need the most high-end thing. This works just fine. This will diffuse the light perfectly fine out of my strobe, and it'll allow me to spread that light out a little bit and make it just softer on my subject's face. It's small, it's lightweight, it's easy to pack in my bag, and at 14 bucks, again, far less expensive than what you'd find in maybe like a large soft box. You could also do a reflective umbrella, but in this case, I've opted for just the basic shoot-through. Next, let's talk about our light source, and that's the one area in this particular case where I didn't include a less expensive or a budget-friendly piece of equipment. This is my Godox AD200 Pro 2, and the reason that I have it for today's video is because, well, it's what I had, and it's what I've been shooting clients with this week, but you could very easily swap this out for something like a Godox V480 or the V100, the V1. I would throw my Canon 430EX in here, and that would work perfectly fine for my purposes today. The one big advantage of the Godox here is that I am using the X3 trigger, so that does allow me to both trigger the flash while also controlling the power level for the flash. But that shouldn't persuade you to go one way or the other. Again, if you're looking at something budget, you can easily throw a less expensive flash on here and then use an inexpensive trigger. I've done videos about those in the past. You just might have to manually alter the settings on your flash. But as you see, when we get into kind of setting up the levels for this, you kind of have to do that a little bit anyway. But if you definitely want a flash that you can control remotely for power levels, a lot of those inexpensive flashes that I mentioned do work with the X3 system and others like the system from Newer, the system from Westcott, and you can get inexpensive triggers that will also relay that power value to the flash so you can control it remotely. Assume that if you were shooting without a wireless trigger like mine, you would have to just manually go up to the flash and dial in that adjustment. So that brings us to the camera situation that we have today. I am shooting with the X3 on the top of my Canon R5. I have my Canon EF85 1.4. That's my favorite portrait lens. It is adapted right now, and I've also got the Newer grip on my camera. But I could just as easily be shooting with an EOS R, a Z50, an A7C, or really any other mirrorless or DSLR camera that works for you. I've said this before, the best camera that you have is the one that you have. So now that we have our stand set up, we've got our flash connected to our camera, we're gonna talk a little bit about exposure. Now in some cases, this can be the hardest part, although today the hardest part might be finding a subject, unless we end up doing some self-portraits here. Okay, so what does it mean to expose for the background? How do we actually do that? Well, basically you're just gonna make sure that everything in your background is inside of your exposure, that there's nothing clipped and you don't have any highlights that are blowing out. Now, in some instances, you might actually expose your scene for your subject, and that would make a lot of sense. And I'm gonna use this video as sort of an example. Now, right now, I'm shooting at ISO 800 at f5 at 1/50 because, well, I'm shooting video and there are rules about that, and I'm trying to follow those rules as best I can. I'm also using an ND filter. This is what it's not very good. So I've got 5 stops of ND on this lens to prevent my background from blowing out and from really me looking terrible. But I'm focused on the whole scene. When you're shooting with off-camera flash, the first step is to make sure that not your whole scene, but just the background of your scene is properly exposed. And that's how you get those dark and deep skies. It's how you're gonna get just amazing views of the water out here. So now I'm gonna bring the exposure up, and I'm gonna use my ND filter to do it. So this is an example of what it might look like if you were overexposed in the background. Now I'm overexposed as well, but the whole scene is overexposed. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna adjust our settings to ensure that our background is properly exposed. Now I normally keep my ISO at 100, and if I'm shooting portraits, I wanna select the aperture, the f-stop that is most pleasing for the portrait that I'm gonna be making. So if I'm shooting an individual, I might be shooting at 1.4. If I'm shooting maybe a family, I might be shooting at f3.5, f4. Couple, maybe f2.8. Now, in this case, I'm shooting on an f4 lens, so we want to put that to f4. But unfortunately, that just makes it even brighter. So now we're gonna bring up our shutter speed. And right there at 1/400, the background is now no longer clipped. Now, this would be inappropriate to use for video. I look very choppy, but you get the idea. But we can make it even darker and really get some good detail out of that background. So I'm gonna bring it up to 1/800, maybe even lower. So now we're at 1/2500. The background is pretty well exposed. I am very dark, but that's okay, because that is where our flash comes in. So if I was gonna be shooting a portrait here, maybe with my client sitting on these rocks, I've got the background pretty well exposed, but I'm still very dark, and the shutter speed for this obviously is very bad for video, but again, you get the idea. Now we're going to bring in the flash for additional power to bring me up in the foreground, to bring the subject up in the foreground. I'm sure that there are some very, very smart photographers who can look at a scene like this, look at the settings on their camera, and instantly say, I know what that needs to be. That's not me. I don't know. So I got an idea about where I'm gonna start, but I know that depending on the settings, depending on the environment, which can change, and depending on your flash and how you have it configured, honestly, I employ the guesstimate approach. And considering how bright I know that background is, I'm gonna put my flash relatively close, and honestly, I'm gonna shoot it to start at probably 1/4 power. I think I'm gonna have to go up from there. You might agree, photographers watching this video, but we're gonna give that a try. So I ended up trying out a couple of different compositions. I ended up liking over here with these rocks behind me. I thought they looked pretty cool. And they let me kind of stand up, which I liked. I did end up boosting the power up to full on the flash, but I felt as the sun continues to go down, I was able to really just kind of hit this really nice balance. It's a simple shot. There's nothing crazy going on there. There's probably a lot of improvement that could be made, and I'll leave that to you to let me know what you think. But generally, it's a great place to start with a basic light stand and a shoot-through umbrella. Now, I did end up adding my ND filter back onto the camera, and there's a reason for that, and I want to explain it. So it goes without saying that understanding the exposure triangle is a key part of doing things like this and adding flash into your photography. So if you're still struggling with getting exposure right in your shots before you add light, adding light is not going to fix anything. It's just going to make things harder and more complicated. But I want to explain why I added my ND filter. And that's because of the fact that, number one, I wanted to be able to bring the light power down of my overall exposure. Adding the ND filter isn't going to just reduce the power of the background or just the power of the flash or anything like that. It's gonna affect the entire scene and all light that's being applied. But what that allowed me to do was keep my aperture at f4 while still exposing for the background. And that was important because I wanted that out of focus blur in the background. But more importantly, I wanted to be able to bring my shutter speed down. Reducing the shutter speed down to 1/200 from, say, 1/800, which is where I was, that's going to add more light, and that shouldn't be a surprise. But newer flashes that support high-speed sync allow you to increase your shutter speed way above that. But what you have to realize is that above your shutter speed, your traditional flash sync speed on your camera, where high-speed sync kicks in, you actually stop getting the maximum power of the flash, because instead of shooting once with one big pop, it actually shoots multiple times within that time so that it can effectively light up your scene at whatever time your shutter is going to be open, because it doesn't know and it can't sync. Above that 1/200 or 1/160 or 1/250, your shutter and your flash won't sync up. So your flash basically, it overcompensates by just shooting a lot in that time frame. But because the way these flashes are constructed, they can't give you as much power in those fast modes. But by reducing my shutter speed to 1/200, I actually get to maximize the sync. My flash is going to give me its maximum power. And so with the brightness of this background, wanting to shoot at ISO 100, wanting to shoot at an aperture of f4, and needing to shoot down at that 1/200 to maximize the sync of my flash, that gave me the power that I needed to fill in my scene to give me the look that I wanted. The other thing that I didn't mention, but that I do a lot when adjusting and trying to calibrate the amount of power that we're getting out of a flash, is to just move the flash. As long as it's not in your scene or it's in a part of your scene that you can Photoshop out later, you can actually get a significant increase or decrease in power by simply moving your light stand, moving your flash back and forth. All right, so last time to recap. Get yourself an inexpensive light stand to play with, get yourself a flash, and get an inexpensive shoot-through umbrella. I'll put some links down below if you want to check those out. Those are ones that I've linked before. It's a good place to start. It's normally a pretty inexpensive kit to start with. And then once you have your kit set up and you are shooting your scene, you're going to expose for the background. You're going to do that by adjusting your aperture, your ISO, your shutter speed. If you want to keep that aperture full open but still shoot in bright environments like this, you might want to throw on an ND filter. That can also help to make sure that you've got access to the full power of your strobe. Try to keep your ISO at 100 whenever possible, and then you're going to dial in the power of your light by either manipulating its settings or in some cases just moving it closer or further from your subject. And then from there, there's really just kind of a whole world of things that you can try. There's different modifiers and diffusers. There's really just an unlimited amount of things that you can do once you start adding flash and more lights and different lights, all the different things that you can do when you're adding light to your images. Just remember, get your exposure triangle down first. Once you're comfortable with that, you can move on to the next step, which is adding flash. And you don't have to add flash. You could have watched this entire video and decided, I don't want to do this, and that's okay. There are so many people, myself included, who spend a lot of their time shooting paying clients in natural light. It looks gorgeous. You can do so much with it. The sun is always going to be your first and best light. That's it for me. Again, links down in the description. If you want to support what I'm doing here, the best and easiest way to do that is just to hit subscribe, hit like. Those are free. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.